So I've been pretty nonchalant over my years of watching anime. Some seasons, I watch what looks interesting, either by its description, its promotional art, its trailer. Sometimes I go by the people that worked on said anime. But one of the ways I almost never use to decide what anime I'm going to watch is by going to other people's lists of popular shows or good shows of any given season. Now, sometimes what I like and what they like and put on those lists do occasionally align, especially in slow seasons or seasons with a lot of sequels. But I've never actually looked at any of them to decide if I should watch something. That changes today. Because I am halfway curious and I'm also tiny bit behind on my watching of this season, I've decided that we today are going to attempt to judge the tastes of random places on the internet that like to recommend anime, or at least rank them in any shape or form. The rules I am following today is that I must watch the most popular and or most watched series of the new season that is recommended by said internet location that is not a sequel. We're not looking at sequels. The sequels are a whole different thing. And at the end, we're gonna judge them all and see which of them gave the best recommendation. And since, we're going to be spending some time sitting here, or at least I'm gonna be sitting here relaxing and watching some of that anime that I may or may not enjoy, I figured that we might as well do it in a way that I will enjoy regardless. And that involves consuming a wide variety of treats. Segue! This video is sponsored by both Tokyo Treat and Sakurako. Monthly subscription boxes full of Japanese snacks for your mouth to enjoy. The boxes in question for the current month are helping to celebrate the upcoming Moon Festival, with treats like the salt lemon flavored Kit Kat, because we thought the lemon kind of looked like a moon. Not gonna argue with that logic. That is actually better than I expected. While the Tokyo Treat box focuses on snack foods, more specifically with up to 20 limited edition, exclusive and seasonal Japanese snacks, the Sakurako box is a little bit more cultural, containing 20 traditional, authentic, and artisan Japanese snacks, alongside an included little plate here to either hold your snacks or a small teacup. I don't have a small teacup here, because at the studio we only carry large mugs for as much coffee as we can fill them with, though perhaps that should change. Especially since almost everything in the Sakurako box pairs well with tea. I know that because of the accompanying booklet for both boxes that lets you know what everything is, contains some bonus Japanese culture information, and also has all of the allergy info for those that need it. There'll be a coupon code in the description for $5 off your first box alongside links to both individual boxes. Now, these specific boxes are only going to be available for a limited time before they swap over to a new theme. So if anything that I end up showing off looks interesting, you should click on the links and check them out sooner rather than later. Your stomach will thank you. So I'm going to be eating and drinking, apparently, my way through a bunch of these as we go through and try to determine what places online perhaps have good taste. While we taste. So I feel like I should probably explain why I'm doing this in the first place. Because normally, I don't follow what other people say for a variety of reasons. I don't like seeing what other people think of things before I'm able to kind of develop my own opinion. And most seasons, honestly, I just watch everything, or at least I watch a little taste of everything to try and see what catches my eye, see what catches my attention, and I just kind of move on from there. This season is particularly interesting because I am essentially behind. I've actually spent the last little week and a bit out of town. I was attending a memorial service for my grandmother, which took up the majority of both my normal time and kind of mental headspace. So focusing on a random episode of some anime that I didn't necessarily have any attachment to yet, as you do at the mid-season and so forth, didn't make all that much sense. So for this season specifically, kind of looking up what other people are recommending outside of the sequels, I thought would be very interesting to see, especially if they're different. See, that was kind of the thing. I was really hopeful that I'd be able to find enough that was differently recommended to see that, yes, no, different locations on the net have different tastes and different recommendations, and things are more popular in certain circles and spaces. And I think that's exactly what I found out. So the first place that I went to was kind of a very, very old standby. I was like, well, what did I used to do way back in the day before I did YouTube? And I would go to places like my anime list. And Mal conveniently has the ability to sort things by popularity. So when I first did this list, hopefully it is the exact same when I record the footage of me actually going and doing it. The show with the most amount of members that was not a sequel was Call of the Night, which was interesting when I first saw that because I was like, wait, do I own that? Turns out I did. I got this manga sent to me by Viz a little while back, and the reason why I never read it or did anything with it is because they sent me volumes 1 and 3, which is extremely frustrating because it means that I have this useless book here now that I need to go and get volume 2 of. That's how they get you, see? They send you 1 and 3 for free, and then you gotta go and buy volume 2. So Call of the Night is essentially a modern vampire story. One that I didn't actually think I was going to like going into it, because I have seen vampires been done time and time again in a variety of different ways. So you have your main character, Ko, who is only 14 years old. He's having societal issues, he's having anxiety problems, he's not really fitting in well with people. He is, you know, your stereotypical anime protagonist, at least from a school setting anyway. This was an isekai, would be a badass, totally perfect in every other way. Which is actually why I really like these ones. I like characters that have problems that they will either attempt to fix or learn to live with, and that seems to be what he wants to do. However, he wants to do that by becoming a vampire. He ends up meeting the female vampire, Nazuna, as one does by just roaming around the middle of the city at night. She takes an interest in him, lures him back to her room that includes nothing but a futon and 2 pillows, and even after sucking his blood for the first time, he is now suddenly more interested in becoming a vampire than literally anything else in his life. I'm not actually sure of his motivations per se. The show is very much giving off this feeling like he is missing some kind of a feeling of belonging. He doesn't really have much of a social structure that he belongs in, especially in the very first episode. There's a lot of focus put on the fact that he doesn't have any friends. Kind of proved a little bit false as the episodes go on, but that's how he's introduced. We don't know what his family life is like. We assume he's sneaking out to go and roam around the city in the middle of the night, but we're not entirely sure whether that's just from parents or siblings or what have you. So he's trying to find a place to belong, and he finds comfort in the night, in the quiet and the silence. He finds a freedom in that world. So now with the possibility of becoming a vampire, a being that literally exists within that world and is devoted to that world, he is somewhat jumping at the chance. Now, his problem, of course, is that in the world of Call of the Night, vampires are not automatically made by having their blood sucked from them. The history of vampires is actually kind of interesting in that most vampire stories always have a different way of how you either make another vampire or how you make a thrall or how you just make a meat popsicle, essentially. And at the moment, he is stuck purely in meat popsicle state. According to Nazuna, you can only make a vampire when the human falls in love with a vampire and then gets their blood sucked, which then leads him to decide, well then, obviously, I'm going to fall in love with you. Which is an interesting take, also because they spent a lot of time in the first episode pretty much showcasing that Ko has no idea what this love thing is. He was confessed to by one of his classmates and he kind of blew her off, not necessarily because he was being mean about it, but because he didn't understand. Love is not something that seems to be coming to him naturally. He doesn't get it. He's not following through with the normal way of being in love or having a crush on someone. It just doesn't seem to click with him all that much. So now suddenly to say that, oh yes, he is absolutely going to fall in love with this girl because she's a vampire and that's what he needs to do. I mean, that's not how love works, and I think that that's the point. On the flip side, we don't know how long Nazuna's been around. She is a vampire, so essentially assuming that this follows normal vampire characteristics, she's essentially immortal. They make a bit of a joke in one of the episodes about her having a brick cell phone, which is older than my time, so she's been around the block for a while. It wouldn't surprise me if the show comes along and says that she's like in her 50s or 60s at the very least, but we don't know how long she's been around, but she does seem rather smitten with Ko as a character. Not just because he seems to be fascinating to her in a variety of ways, but also apparently his blood tastes really good. Good enough to make a point of mentioning it, and also developing a relationship with him so that she can basically have his blood on tap. Now, what this means for the show going forward is kind of anyone's guess. We've already been introduced to other characters, and at least one friend who really does wish that he would come back to school, because apparently he's been skipping out on that. I do love the storylines. to a point in anime where you have these characters that can just skip out on school with like literally no consequences. Because I look back on my childhood and I'm like, that would never happen. You don't show up to school, you better hope you have a way of stopping your parents from finding out about it, because then you're in deep. But no, here's this 14-year-old kid who can sneak out at night until literal sunrise, not go to school, and his parents seem to be okay with that. Again, we haven't seen his parents. We don't know if they even exist. He could be an orphan living on his own for all we know. That's happened before. The main romance of the show does seem to be, of course, between Ko and Nazuna. Whether or not that'll actually be completed, whether or not the series will end with Ko becoming a vampire, that's, I think, the big question. I think it's too early, at least just with the anime. I'm sure manga readers already know better. It's too early to say whether or not the show is going the track of trying to show Ko that there is more to being a human, maybe trying to allow him to find social circles and things to live for, essentially, that does not rely on him finding comfort in the night and wanting to become a vampire. Maybe trying to explain to him how becoming a vampire is a terrible idea for a variety of reasons. Nazuna as a character can be a perfect template and say, well, here's some horrible crap that's happened to her over her long life. You don't really want to live this life. Enjoy your humanity while you have it. Because there's so much about Nazuna's character that we don't know. We don't know what she goes up to in the middle of the night. Ko has spent several nights trying to find her, and she claims that she is also looking for him at the same time, but really she seems to have absolutely zero problem finding him when she absolutely wants to. So what is she doing for the other parts of the night? We don't know. We don't know what other vampires or more supernatural characters exist within this world, and what relationships she might have with them, how that will affect things going forward. Maybe Ko will rekindle some sort of more deeper friendship or love with one of his former classmates. But maybe it'll be a one-sided love, and then he will become a vampire by falling in love with Nazuno, and then his classmate will fall in love with him, and then they'll all be vampires by the end of it. Who knows? It has been a nice, chill series that I've enjoyed my small amount of time with it as I've been sitting here. I'm not fully caught up with it at the moment because, hey, we're already in the mid-season, so there's like 6 or 7 episodes to watch, and I had at least one other show to go through. But I will say I am quite enjoying it to this point. It's nice and chill. While I have seen things from the story before, not to the point that it is necessarily unique, I am invested enough to see where it's going to go, and I will be happy to continue watching it beyond this point. Now, after Mal, there are a couple of other big things that pop up. Hell, if you just go to Google, don't do this, by the way. If you just go to Google and search like anime recommendations, a lot of things pop up. Hell, IGN popped up, and originally I was going to use that for this list because it was on the top page of Google, so I'm like, hey, if some random person just decided to Google and wanted to find some recommendations, what the heck would they get? And IGN put out Lucifer and the Biscuit Hammer, and we already talked about this briefly in my seasonal video from a couple of weeks back because a few episodes of Biscuit Hammer was already out. I don't think it's got much better. So honestly, I didn't even try. So we're wiping that from the list. Sorry, IGN. Let's move on a bit. Then I actually thought, well, hey, why don't we go see what Reddit thinks? Terrible idea, by the way. But you know, content. And actually, it was a pain in the ass to figure out what the hell Reddit likes. Because if you go to like our anime right now, you sort by most popular, even in the last couple of days, and the vast majority of what gets upvoted is announcement posts and literally anything related to Chainsaw Man at this moment. But Chainsaw Man ain't out yet, so we're not talking about that. And I do know that on our anime, they post like discussion threads about new anime episodes that come out. So trying to figure out what the most popular of those were was a big pain in the ass. And most of the time, all I came up with was all of the sequel shows that I'm already watching, which is perfectly fine. But it took like a very long time for something new to pop up. And then it ended up being something that I'm already paying attention to for this video. So it didn't work out that well. But then I decided to go and check out AniTrends. Now, AniTrends is a website that I'm pretty sure I've talked about on the channel before. And if not, I've definitely thought about it. They're a website where people will go and they will rank and vote on what they think are the best and most popular shows from any given season. And then that'll be ranked into a wonderful and beautifully made chart. But it is limited entirely to the people that actually submit information. The more people that watch things and the more people that vote on things for Anime Trends, the more accurate that chart is. The less people that do that, the less accurate it is. So based on the audience that actually uses the website, I was curious as to what their top show was. And at the time that I actually checked, their top show was Lycoris Recoil, to the point where this original series was higher than the sequels. So I thought, well, there's got to be something good to this. So Lycoris Recoil is essentially about schoolgirl assassins. I say schoolgirls even though they're not actually schoolgirls. They don't go to school. They just use the uniforms to blend into everyday life. There is a secret governmental society within the Japanese government that takes orphans and trains them to be secret assassins. These assassins are charged with protecting the safety of the rest of the citizenry, and despite being only essentially high school age, although the actual ages aren't mentioned, I'm assuming it's high school and not middle school. I've already been caught with Call of the Night because I thought they were in high school before he stated he was 14. Haha, you can't tell, can you? Despite all of these girls being in high school age, they know more about ways to kill and interact with society in a very different way than your average high schooler. The concept of having young girls or young children be assassins is something that's actually common enough. I still think overall it's a pretty uncommon premise in anime as a whole, but it's common enough that there are other examples, Gunslinger Girl, Phantom. It is something that has existed before, but I don't think necessarily to this scale. Usually if you have some secret society and you're going to train orphans to be assassins, you only have like a small handful, like one team. This seems to be a full-blown organization with like hundreds of these orphan girls, which really does make me question where all of these orphans are coming from. And if your society is so great, why do you have so many orphans? Not just that, but orphans that are being able to be trained in this way. I would imagine that whatever training you have to make them into these super assassins don't actually exist. Because if you had such a good training regimen to be able to take anybody and turn them into the super assassin by the age of like 16, then why couldn't you not just supplement your actual education for your regular citizens so you wouldn't need it? A lot bigger questions than I think this show is trying to actually answer. So it happens to follow two major assassin-y characters. One who goes against orders of her existing team in an attempt to save another teammate's life and gets reprimanded for it, and her new partner slash senpai who was involved in some big, apparently important event of the show's past, and both of them are somewhat exiled from the main unit and work out of a cafe, which I found really hilarious because Tokyo Mew Mew is also airing in this season, and the whole we're going to have girls with superpowers that work at a restaurant of some description was kind of a little bit of a fun nod for me. Probably has no relation at all and they don't actually care. What has been making this series interesting, and especially for me interesting enough that I am fully caught up on it now because I just kept watching episodes because I couldn't freaking stop, is that there is a level where our characters are just so good and so perfect that you want to see if there will ever be a situation in which they don't do well. And that actually has happened. In the second or third episode, our characters are actually on a mission with a protectee, and things don't go well. These girls, these assassins, seem to have been trained to basically almost be superheroes. Like, you have our main character who can literally calculate the trajectory of bullets pointed at her and dodge them like they were nothing. They try to pass this off as something that literally someone could physically do, potentially, when in reality, I don't think that is ever going to be a thing without some kind of outside help. The fact that she can just dodge bullets, I mean, we're just gonna go with it. And that's fine. But because they have these supernatural abilities, watching them interact with this world and fail in some cases is fascinating, because normally when you give characters these superpowers, they don't fail. And if that was the case, I would be very curious as to what the point of this show is. But at the moment, we have one character who's desperately trying to go back to the main unit because that's where she feels like her family is. And we have this other character who's already been abandoned by the main unit, who just is a lot more happy-go-lucky and is trying to show how their old family is not really all that it's chalked up to be. And I would agree, there have been multiple times where this organization has acted in ways that I think is utterly stupid based on what I would assume they would have had to have done to even get to this point. You have their leader who doesn't seem to give a care about when the members, their assassin teams, are infighting with one another. Like, just basic structural discipline when you have your subordinates fighting with each other over absolutely stupid things. In the grand scheme of things, yes, it's very important to them at the moment, but in the grand scheme of things, and as far as their organization would be concerned, it's absolutely stupid. And the fact that the boss just kind of stands there and lets it happen, and then just kind of walks away, I question why she is in that position. And there's a lot of little things like that with this world that I don't fully jive well with. I'm just questioning why it exists, why it happens, what that means for this world as a whole. I do feel like there was a number of things with Lycoris Recoil as far as a setting that wasn't fully thought out, but at the same time, I do also feel like how things are presented makes up for a lot. A1 Pictures is very good at making things pretty. I think that kind of is the summary of my thoughts here. And because it is so pretty, because it is really well animated, and because despite problems that I'm having with the world that the characters exist in, I'm still extremely enjoying the characters on their own. I like seeing what they're doing. I like how they interact with one another, how they're dealing with situations that pop up. And yes, I fully understand why this series is so highly regarded at this moment, at least as far as original shows go, and according to AniTrends, how this is the best show of the season. And you know, I'm going to disagree because Made in Abyss is airing. And it's kind of one of my favorite shows of all time, so bias. But beyond that, like, I do see why it is good, and I am absolutely going to continue watching this until the end. Really, though, I do think I was limiting myself in this particular season just because of how the season's gone. I don't think it's controversial to say that this particular season has been a little bit more dry. We have a couple of really big sequel shows that are currently out between Made in Abyss and Overlord and Devil is a Part-Timer. But as far as like new shows that are not tied to existing IPs, we only have so many of them. So maybe this experiment of mine would have worked a little bit better had there been a little bit more variety, but I still think it worked out pretty well. It helped to point my way in a particular direction during a season where I kind of needed it, and I think it worked out for that purpose. Probably won't do that next season though, because next season everyone's going to be paying attention to Chainsaw Man. But usually, when you have shows that are as big as Chainsaw Man, almost always some other smaller, by comparison, diamond in the rough that exists that everybody else wipes away because it's not the next big thing. And I want to know what that is. So I'm probably going to be watching a lot of things that are not Chainsaw Man alongside Chainsaw Man. So if you want to watch either of these shows, and I do actually recommend both of them, I think they were very worth my time, and I'm glad that I found them. I'm going to put links down in the description for them. They'll be slightly below the link of our sponsors because our sponsors are very helpful in our video making process at the moment, but also very helpful is our patrons. Those patrons who make it very possible for me to be able to do what I do in the way that I do it, and I cannot thank you guys enough for that. If you are not a patron, there will also be a link down in the description so you can check out our Patreon and support us if you feel so inclined. And of course, a very big thank you to those patrons who do support just a little bit more, specifically Ross Emerson, Omar Showman, Hector Montemayor, Wago221, City Yamako, and Ryphen Bonaparte. And until next time, ladies, gentlemen, and others, watch more anime. Find it however you want, but watch more anime and stay frosty.